There are many negative myths about frozen food, among them that frozen meals offer subpar flavors, inferior nutrition, and artificial additives. But we're here to dispel these misconceptions and show you the possibilities in your freezer. If you think frozen food comes optimally packaged for longevity, you may want to think again. Frozen food packaging is designed for transportation and storage at the supermarket, but not necessarily for long-term freezing in your home. That original packaging usually doesn't provide an airtight or moisture-resistant seal, which is crucial for preserving the texture and flavor of frozen foods, as well as protecting them from picking up odors. Additionally, store packaging can deteriorate over time, leading to the dreaded freezer burn, which can negatively affect the quality and taste of the food. Unless you're planning to eat the frozen food within a couple of weeks, it's a good idea to repackage it before popping it in the freezer. For best results, transfer the frozen items to freezer bags, pushing out as much air as possible before you seal them. When freezing liquid items such as soups, stews, or sauces, it's especially smart to use airtight containers. Freezer containers are usually made from plastic, feature airtight lids, and are sometimes even stackable to ensure the best use of your valuable freezer space. While you can freeze most types of food, some items don't fare well in sub-zero environments and can undergo undesirable changes in texture or flavor when exposed to extremely cold temperatures. Veggies such as lettuce, celery, and parsley are likely to end up limp and waterlogged when defrosted. Cooked rice or spaghetti also tends to lose its texture and it can become mushy in the freezer. Meanwhile, cooked egg whites take on a rubbery, spongy consistency when frozen. It's also unwise to freeze eggs in their shells, as they may crack, leaving them susceptible to bacteria. Dairy products such as milk, mayonnaise, yogurt, and sour cream may curdle or separate upon thawing. Additionally, fried foods could lose their crispness after thawing, since oil doesn't typically freeze. Freezing also changes the flavor of many spices and seasonings. Additions such as garlic, pepper, cloves, and certain herbs have a tendency to go bitter when frozen. Freezing salt, on the other hand, can result in the loss of flavor. Freezing can add a rancid undertone to any food that contains fat. And despite what you may have heard, freezing coffee is generally not recommended because it exposes the beans to moisture, which can negatively impact their taste and overall quality. No matter how tempting it may be, trying to freeze hot or even warm food can jeopardize the safety of both the food itself and neighboring items in the freezer. According to the USDA, the so-called danger zone for food, which can promote the growth of bacteria, lies between 40 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. To keep it bacteria-free, food should never be left in the danger zone for longer than 2 hours. Since hot food naturally takes longer to freeze, you risk it spending too much time in the danger zone, allowing harmful bacteria to multiply. In addition, placing hot food directly into the freezer can raise the temperature inside the whole compartment, potentially affecting the safety of other stored items that may start to defrost. To prevent safety hazards, cool food thoroughly before placing it into the freezer. Michigan State University recommends a 2-stage cooling process. First, separate food into smaller portions, then place those in containers or freezer-safe bags. Next, either place the packaging in the refrigerator to bring down its temperature, or pop it in a large pot or kitchen sink filled with cold water and ice. While stirring the water in the pot or sink can accelerate the cooling process, be careful not to let any of the water come into direct contact with the food. Freezer burn happens when food is exposed to oxygen in a freezer for an extended period of time. It typically happens when food isn't properly sealed or wrapped. The main effects of freezer burn are changes in the food's texture, color, and flavor. Freezer burn manifests as dry, gray, or white spots on the food surface. It can also take the form of ice crystals. As a rule of thumb, foods with higher water content, such as meat and fish, are more susceptible to freezer burn, while their low water content counterparts, such as nuts and seeds, generally fare better in the freezer.
A plague of freezer burn flu.
While it's unsightly and unappetizing, freezer burn won't make you sick. If the freezer burn is localized, simply remove the affected area and proceed as normal. In cases of severe freezer burn, however, you may have to discard the entire item. To minimize the chances of freezer burn, it may be worth investing in a vacuum sealer. While storing food in the freezer at 0 degrees Fahrenheit generally keeps it safe from picking up new pathogens, it doesn't kill anything that's already in the food, such as bacteria, mold, or yeast. What it does is render them inactive. More specifically, the low temperature keeps microbes in a dormant state. This is precisely how freezing preserves food, by stopping the growth of microorganisms that are responsible for spoiling food and causing gastrointestinal problems. But when the temperature of frozen food rises above 40 degrees Fahrenheit, all the microorganisms that were there when you froze it become active again. Under favorable conditions, the pathogens can multiply to a number that may lead to food poisoning. This could happen if the food is thawed and left unattended for longer than 2 hours.
Anything that's been pre-made and starts to thaw above 40 degrees after 2 hours, it's gotta go.
Fluctuations in freezer temperature can also contribute to microbial growth. This can occur during power outages or if the freezer door is left open for extended periods of time. While it may seem counterintuitive, the fact is that frozen food can sometimes be more nutritious than its fresh counterparts.
I've always thought fresh is best. If you want all of the nutrients, go fresh.
It's not that simple, Cherry.
This is because vegetables and fruit meant for freezing are typically harvested at peak ripeness. They're also flash frozen, or frozen very quickly, which helps lock in vitamins and minerals. These nutrients would gradually be lost if the produce was purchased fresh and kept on the kitchen countertop or in the refrigerator for too long. Vegetables intended for freezing are usually blanched at temperatures of around 90 degrees Fahrenheit. This eliminates enzymes that could otherwise lead to discoloration and flavor loss. Jean Lester, a plant physiologist at the USDA, explained that, from a commercial standpoint, you definitely have a more nutrient-dense product than something that has likely been picked, refrigerated, then put on a truck for up to 3 days, then stored in a warehouse before arriving at a grocery store. As we become more aware of our eating habits, the frozen food industry has been subject to a substantial transformation that includes offering healthier and more wholesome choices. And while some frozen products remain focused on convenience, other manufacturers are doing their best to cater to the growing demand for healthy meal options. Luckily, this means that when it comes to frozen food, preservatives and high sodium levels are becoming less common. Frozen products don't necessarily require a lot of preservatives to increase their shelf life. Freezing is a form of food preservation that has been used for many centuries. Chinese people were already using blocks of ice to store food in 1000 BC. The world's first commercial freezing facility opened in 1861 Australia. And while the operation wasn't a great success at the time, it paved the way for frozen food technology. In the modern era, while some frozen meals may indeed contain high levels of preservatives such as sodium, it's by no means a given. Many frozen meals contain fewer than 600 milligrams of sodium, which is more than acceptable, especially when compared to some fast food options. While frozen food will lose its flavor and texture over time, it won't expire as long as that food is consistently kept below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. In other words, if your food has been sitting in the refrigerator for years, through numerous power outages, it's best to bid it farewell. However, food degrades in quality the longer it's frozen. If you're uncertain whether a thawed item is safe to eat, consult your nose. While defrosted food that looks unappealing may still be safe to eat, items that smell rancid are a definite no-no. If in doubt, always err on the side of caution. Fresh beef, lamb, veal, and pork are best consumed between 4 and 12 months of freezing. Meanwhile, uncut fresh poultry should remain at its peak in the freezer for up to a year. This goes down to between 2 and 6 months for cooked meat. Soups and stews are best eaten within 3 months of the freezing date, while fish remains at its peak quality within a window of 2 and 8 months from freezing, depending on the type. Finally, bacon and sausages are best enjoyed within just 1 to 2 months of freezing. Thawing food on the kitchen counter is an all too common practice. However, it's generally not recommended. Bacteria multiply rapidly at room temperature and can leave you with a nasty case of food poisoning.
It's food poisoning. I have it too. I did not sleep for 1 second last night, and I cracked the bottom of the toilet bowl.
But some frozen items don't require defrosting. For instance, soups, stews, and sauces can be easily reheated straight from their frozen state. Frozen berries can also be popped right into a blender to make smoothies. There are 3 methods for safely thawing food. The safest, albeit time-consuming, approach involves placing frozen food in the refrigerator. This prevents the items from entering the temperature danger zone. If you decide to use this method, it's essential to plan ahead. Small items may defrost overnight, while larger items may require several days. A faster method of thawing food involves placing it in leak-proof bags before submerging it in cold water. For best results, change the water every half hour. If time is of the essence, pop your frozen goodies in the microwave and set it on the defrost setting, though this may affect the texture of your meal. Frozen food is a lifesaver when it comes to convenience and reducing food waste.
With frozen food, you're 5 times more likely not to encounter food waste.
However, when you're thawing something out and your dinner plans change, you might wonder if it's safe to refreeze partially defrosted ingredients, especially fish or meat. The good news is that you can refreeze most foods, provided that you follow a few important guidelines. If you've thawed food in the refrigerator and kept it under 40 degrees Fahrenheit for no longer than 4 days, you can generally return it to the freezer without compromising its safety. That said, the food may lose some texture and flavor due to moisture loss during thawing. It's also safe to freeze cooked dishes made from defrosted raw food. But it's crucial that you don't refreeze items that have been left at room temperature for more than 2 hours. And if the temperature is above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, the limit is 1 hour. On the other hand, there are a few items that should never be refrozen. For instance, ice cream and some other frozen desserts don't refreeze well, as they tend to develop an unappealing icy texture when refrozen. Instead, consider using any leftover ice cream in milkshakes or smoothies, where the melted texture won't matter so much. While it's not a given, a lot of frozen items are actually cheaper than their fresh counterparts. In fact, the cost savings associated with frozen food compared to fresh can reach 50%, or even more in some cases. The value of frozen food goes beyond price, however. The fact that it can be stored for months or even years minimizes waste, as well as the financial burden of discarding anything that went bad before you can eat it. Buying frozen goods is also a great way to stock up on food that becomes expensive out of season, such as berries or winter squash, or food that's cheaper bought in bulk. By capitalizing on discounts, you can stock up on frozen fruits, vegetables, and meats, ensuring that you always have them on hand for a good price.